At some point, it's strange the way sometimes the worst of things in life and the best of things in life put us in touch with people that seem to be traveling in separate orbits that we would not usually reach or be in touch with, as if there was a magnet that just brings people into our lives and in our orbits who, under usual conditions, we just don't meet. It's just the magic of the universe. I recently had the pleasure of meeting a woman named Linda Taylor, who was the woman who introduced me to RETT Syndrome, which I, like 99% of the people watching this, never heard of. And then I met Linda Taylor, who happened to be a humanitarian and a being with such compassion, love, and devotion for finding a cure for this, delicately hidden inside the being of a supermodel, and among other things, she helped give me the key to your front door so we could have this conversation. How did the two of you meet Linda?
We met Linda through Jason. Jason came to the first Hope for Hannah event.
Jason Rem is a filmmaker and has produced the most brilliant documentary on RETT Syndrome. And we will be seeing examples of his work throughout this piece. And we are also going to allow people to be able to get a copy of this remarkably impactful work by a brilliant filmmaker whose heart and compassion will be seen on the screen. So now please continue your story.
So Jason was invited by one of the guests at the first Hope for Hannah event that I held. We held for, it was a fundraiser for RSRT. And Jason was there and he came up to me. You came up to me at the end and said you wanted to shoot a documentary on RETT Syndrome and wanted to, meet with us. And I mean, this is Los Angeles. The sounded really nice, but I really didn't think I believed him.
Hollywood jive, that kind of.
I couldn't believe it. I had never seen him before. Like a whole documentary. I'm like, we have no budget. We're just trying to scrape money together to raise, find a cure for our daughter and all these other girls. And he says, he was like, yeah, I get that, And I was like, is he for real?
That night, Jason, when you approached Heidi and made that offer, talk to me about the hours that preceded that generous invitation. What happened in you that brought you to that moment?
Well, I'd been invited to this event that I really knew nothing about by someone who seemed to have an extra ticket at a table, which is very standard and common. And he said, come to this event and you might meet some people and learn a little something about this, disease. But he didn't really talk too much about it. I got there and it was a mingling kind of thing, and I didn't really know anyone there except the little group that we were with. And then they showed a video on Hannah, the Hope for Hannah video, which they had put together themselves. And I got a glimpse into what they were dealing with. But having heard nothing about it, and then to see a 3-minute video and learn about this devastating disorder and this brutally horrific issue that these people deal with on a daily basis. And there was kind of a strange feeling. And then Heidi and Monica spoke at the event, and through their speeches I was able to connect even more with the disorder. And I really can't say anything more than I was touched and in a moment struck that I needed to help. And where that came from within, I can say, is the only place. And I know I'm used to working on projects that maybe have very little resources or in a tougher spot. I'm also drawn to things that I know nothing about, and I want to then help people learn more about from a storytelling standpoint. So, and I also knew I probably couldn't cut a check large enough to convey the awareness that we could help raise through what we thought would be a small 5-minute documentary that would tell a little more of the story than what we were seeing in the video they put together themselves, or the PSA that was, again, a short spot. And I went to Monica and Heidi and Jonathan, I met as well, and mentioned this to them, and wasn't sure in the moment how we would get it done, but intuitively I knew we would get it done. And I think I mentioned right away to the two of you, and he said, oh, our friend's a DP who happened to be sitting right next to them.
Oh,
and
right.
Keith Solomon,
Keith, yeah.
who brought along a friend of his,
DPB,
director of photography, who was able to be the go-to camera for our first shoot, and eventually was able to help get the ship out of the dock, so to speak, in my mind. That, okay, there's already a first indicator that this is possible. And so in that moment, to answer your question without going on further, I then felt that we could do something, and that was the beginning.
I'm going to take it a cut deeper. You were a brilliant documentarian.
Thank
you. You have your own production company. You shoot movies. We're watching part of your documentary right now on this side of the screen. You said a moment ago that there was something about the presentation that evening that made you stand up, and whereas you did not have the financial resources to write the big check, you were willing to turn over your expertise and your knowledge and hundreds of hours of work and filming and editing to create this magnificent documentary. My question: what was it about this specific presentation, this specific moment, this specific cause that touched you, obviously, so deeply? And take a moment to reflect back upon it, if you wish.
I think that it's something that you've actually hit on in the conversation a bit today, or tonight, this evening. And that is the dark and the light balance between the situation. In many causes that are very difficult, in trying to raise awareness, you're simply looking at a tough issue, you're showing that tough issue, and you're saying raise money to help a family or help a child or an adult who needs this, you know, a leg up or an extra hand. With this issue, the dark side of it was as devastating as anything I had ever seen, and very complicated and very hard to understand from a layman's standpoint. The science and the other points they discuss take a degree sometimes to understand. But the light, the hope that these people spoke with, the spectacular science they talked about, the groundbreaking reversal experiment that Adrian Bird had done, the light at the end of the tunnel, which was almost the name of the film in the beginning, because I felt like it was this yin and yang, but the dark part of the yin and yang was much bigger, but the light part was still there and just as bright and trying to fight its way through. And that balance and that beauty that I could find, because I wanted to treat this subject, this difficult subject, in the most beautiful way possible.
Yeah.
And that's all that I knew. And so in looking at the families and the people supporting it, I had a vision, I guess, that could come to life. So there was a difference in the darkness and the light in this situation, where the light was something we could all focus on. The darkness was self-evident. You point a camera to a girl with Rett syndrome and you can instantly see this disease in this difficult situation.
Yeah.
So how we were going to connect with a viewer or anyone who is looking at this and tell them, you need to help because this is a family situation. This is a situation that obviously the girl's dealing with, but when I saw and I only saw this when we started to film, When I saw the siblings interacting with the child that was afflicted, the daughters that were afflicted, it was so beautiful to see how these kids were growing up stronger than most kids who aren't growing up around a situation such as that. And the varying degrees of difficulty you have in the different Rett syndrome girls, from Hannah, who does have a lot of difficulties, and still, even then when we look at her, and she's a beautiful child, and she has such a light within her, and she can express that at a very small level, but we can see it. And then I visited Chelsea in Connecticut, and she has a much more difficult situation.
Chelsea being?
Chelsea's Monica Conrad's daughter in Connecticut, who I visited, who has a much more difficult situation. Older, where the parents have to carry their young teenage daughter now, not just a young girl, and dealing with epileptic seizures on a regular basis, no normal schedule. And so to be quickly integrated into this world of Rett syndrome and meet all these amazing people, and then we're not even talking about the scientists who I was able to meet, including Adrian Bird and Huda Zogby, who are out there and doing different things to try to change the face of Rett syndrome so it never exists on this planet again. So being caught up in that whirlwind, I at sometimes again wasn't sure where the next step would come from, who the editor would be or a composer who might come on board, but they all did. And every time we just took another step towards trying to get this project completed, the step appeared even if I didn't know where it was going to come from.